So we are live at actual Spa. We are at Spa-Francorchamps. We're here for the 24 hours of Spa, but more importantly, the 24 hours of Spa. We're also here for the SRO esports Sim Pro series. It's got a long name. We're here, we're inside the paddock, we're at the SRO hospitality right now, and I'm joined by none other than sim racing and real world motorsport commentating superstar, George Morgan. Hello.
That's a very, very nice intro.
I practiced that.
You were very good at it.
Well, obviously you had your input in it as well. You wanted the superstar bit, so I added that.
Oh, yeah. We have high expectations of this podcast.
So, George, you're no stranger to a real-world racetrack. Your story is one of my absolute favourites of anyone we've had on the podcast because you've truly taken your passion for sim racing and made it into a career, and you've made that step up. Well, let's not say step up, step into motorsport. So you're no stranger to a real-world racetrack. Spa. Is it a favourite?
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. I think going back to even when I started watching Formula One in the 90s, when I was the tender age of 4 years old, and I hark back to the monumental incident. I think it was 1998 when they had the mega crash outside La Source. It's still one of the biggest figments. Obviously not ideal if you're a team owner or a driver.
No, sounds
in
expensive.
That situation. It certainly does, doesn't it? It is expensive,
Get the
folks.
credit card
I wouldn't
out.
recommend crashing a car on purpose or anything like that. It certainly was expensive, but nevertheless,
Something to talk about afterwards on the way home.
It is.
In the recovery truck.
It certainly
In a
is.
taxi.
But moments like that stick out. So the fact that when I first rolled up here last year to do International GT Open, I was like, wow, you're finally here and you've arrived somewhere that obviously has a very special place in your own history. So yeah.
Yeah, it is a special place, and I think we're trying to, through this little kind of SRO mini-series on the podcast, we're really trying to paint a picture of what it's like to go to SRO. So a lot of sim racers through the ACC game or through AC or through whatever game will have seen these tracks, will have seen these competitions, will be watching this racing on YouTube, but might not necessarily have had the fortune or the time or even the inclination perhaps to come to one of these races. And so we're trying to paint the picture a little bit. Now, Monza, very, very quirky place.
Yeah.
It's old, it's open, it's vast, it's massive, it takes forever to get to any corner because they're all miles away from each other. I thought that Paul Ricard was clinical. It was all the lawns were perfectly mowed and all the signage was perfect and everything was just exactly where it should be. It's very clean, very tidy. Spa, I can't quite put my finger on it other than to say it's just special.
It's homely.
Yes.
I think so.
It's cozy.
It's when you walk into a cottage in the outback and you've got the warm fire on. That's what Spa is all about for me. I mean, I just think you look at it, it's picturesque. You've got the Ardennes forest. It is absolutely stunning. You hear the reverberation of engines as well. If you go to the village, you can hear it from there.
That's nuts.
And while many people might consider a loud noise quite irritating, here at Spa, it's poetic. It's orchestral, I think, in many ways.
Orchestral, that's poetry, man.
I might have just made that word up.
What are you doing at Spa? Why are you here, George?
Why am I here? Well, I'm here for the Formula Regional European Championship by Alpine, which is, of course, a feeder series. Many drivers, of course, get started on the ladder for Formula One at this very series. So I'm here to commentate on the likes of Andrea Kimi, Antonelli, and various others. Obviously, you would have heard of. Maybe even sensational drivers like Rafael Camara as well, who has obviously just come off the back of winning the race today. Obviously, it might not have won today because obviously this is a podcast, but still, nonetheless.
I was enjoying listening to your dulcet tones echo through the paddock and through the SRO
Thank
offices
you.
earlier.
That's very kind.
It was energizing, man.
Well, that's what we're going for. Obviously, for me, racing, I grew up on a cocktail of Murray Walker and obviously engine. So when you compare the two, or when you join them together and combine the two, should I say, it's quite a thrill.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of impression I sort of got at a very early age, and I think it's just kind of stuck with me. So, I've carried the same mannerisms ever since I started sim racing. So.
Nice,
Yeah.
I like that. I like that the blend it's like a cocktail. Your brand is like a cocktail of two absolute icons.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're walking through the paddock. There's a lot going on here, isn't there? Because let's kind of paint the picture. Spa, the 24 hours, more than the Spa 24 hours happens. So obviously, we're here doing the Sim Pro Series. You've got the Pro Series, which has just finished. So the Pro Series is where the sim racers can earn points in the real world series. But you've also got a huge amount of brands showing off new cars, new concept, new programs, etc. It feels like Spa is perhaps the one. It's if you're going to show something off, if you're going to show something to the world as a motorsport brand, this is where you want to do it.
Absolutely. Well, last year, I'll go back to last year when we came here. I was here with Formula Regional last season as well. They unleashed the brand new Ferrari 296 here at this very circuit. It was actually standing right there where the Maserati stand is at this moment in time. So it was fantastic, to see the brand new 296. Of course, now we're seeing it live and in person on track. And also the esports has really taken off as well, because of course you've got the SRO side as well that's pushing a set, of course, of Competizione, of course running an allied series in the world of esports as well, along with its real life product, which is just sensational. But also for me to be part of it and meeting all sorts of different people, catching up with the likes of Emerson Fittipaldi, of course has got his son racing in the series in Freca this year. There's just so much to see. Of course, Audi have got a stand here. It's chock-a-block, and they're using every paddock, and I mean every paddock this weekend.
Yeah, it's very warm feeling, I would say.
It is.
Like there's a lot of people.
Almost communal.
It's very communal, and actually you start to see the same people over and over again at the tracks, and you start to build this little bit of a community in the paddock, and I'm a big fan of Formula One, and I watch Drive to Survive, and they kind of tell the story of the paddock and how everyone knows each other, they bump into each other, there's friendship groups that form within the paddock, and I'm not saying we're living the Formula One dream, right? But what I am saying is that concept absolutely exists within this community.
It does.
And what I really like about SRO and what I really love about these paddocks is that they have properly, genuinely woven in sim racing into their family. It's not like, so to paint the picture for our listeners, we're sat right now in the SRO hospitality smack bang in the middle of the paddock between the two start-finish straights. Next door, 5 meters away, is the esports arena. They haven't put it out in the car park at the back. It is front and center for everyone to see. And when the Pro Series was happening, people were queuing out the door to watch.
They were. It was absolutely rammed. I mean, I was at the back actually. I got to talk to because it was quite nice for me. I met a couple of drivers that raced in the International GT Open last year. Leonardo Polcini was racing in the rig, as well as Charlie Fagg, who is racing in the series this year. Also got to catch up with former champion Jordan Pepper as well, who
you're doing a lot of brushing shoulders and networking here.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I get to meet a lot of faces that I've met before, and continue to meet new ones as well. And it's that's what it's all about. Motorsport, very much like sim racing. We talk about community in sim racing. There is a very vibrant community in sim racing, but it also exists in motorsport. And I love how motorsport is embracing sim racing as well. Because you could only have dreamed of having a facility like this at a racetrack only 10 years ago.
Absolutely, and I just love how included the teams feel as well. So the esports concept they've slapped in the middle of the paddock, but they're being very, very generous and very, very welcoming and hospitable to the teams.
And they're taking part.
Exactly, and the drivers were getting driver managers, which seems like a pretty generous term for the wristbands that we're wearing at the moment. We have access to the whole paddock, so you really feel like a genuine part of this community. But George, tell me something. Your weekend, your usual race weekend, how does it differ when you have something like SRO versus perhaps a single series happening? When you've got the scale of something like 24 hours, how busy is your schedule?
It's pretty busy. I mean, it's different because obviously the days where we work are vastly different because obviously there's 24-hour event running on the Sunday. Everything gets pulled back a date. Obviously Formula Regional got started on the Wednesday. They had the collective tests, and obviously the action got underway in qualifying yesterday on the Thursday. So usually you'd only see qualifying as of Friday. So it's pretty crazy that we actually had to step back a day. And we also had qualifying late at night as well. It was at 7:30 pretty much on the initial day, which was it's weird because usually we're done by 6-7 o'clock. So to all of a sudden have qualifying late at night is pretty bizarre, but it's a nice experience. It's nice to differ it up from time to time.
And there's a real energy as well. Like we were walking through the car parks, through the camping areas, and around kind of like the outside of the paddock, and there's a real buzz. You can tell that there's a lot of people who are kind of making this pilgrimage to their Spa 24 hours. You can tell that they're meeting up with friends that they only see at this event. I get the sense that there's a lot of sim racers perhaps who kind of get together in their Discord servers and they make the trip to Spa. Are you getting the same feeling?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've met so many sim racing people throughout the community now. And it's so great to finally meet a lot of them in person. I mean, obviously when I did the ESLR1 event, that was quite special because we met so many drivers that had obviously competed in ACC, iRacing, at the F1 game as well, and even F1 esports. I got to meet obviously plenty of the drivers in person as time went on. You know, it's so enriching to finally meet them face to face and sort of understand their story that little bit more. It's one thing to obviously talk to them in a server where it's not quite as personable as what it might be as we're having this conversation right now. So the fact that you can have that extra layer of detail, I think it does make the difference.
Yeah, 100%. And what's it like? What's the difference when you bump into a sim racer that you've commentated on, and they're like, "Oh, it's George. You know, you've commentated on one of my races before." Do you get the same thing with the real world drivers? Do you get a sense that these guys have watched back the races and heard your take on their performance?
Yeah, it can lead to some very funny conversations, I'll be honest.
yeah.
Honestly, no, it's great. I mean, when I was, I get some lovely messages off the GT Open drivers and the Euro Formula drivers. You know, they share the clips as well. Optimum Motorsport, who obviously have a very active weekend. You know, they're always on social media. They of course always share the clips here, there, and everywhere, which is really, really cool. And it's really nice. You know, it's more than just. There's more to it, you know, obviously than just simply cars. There's so much, in terms of people, you know, sort of meeting for the first time, getting to know each other face to face, and it's great because you have that access. And I think that's what differs it from many other things. You know, you have that personable environment. You've got drivers walking around the paddock. You can chat to them, you know, catch up with them, get an insight as to what their weekend's all about, and therefore you can kind of understand them that little bit more, which I find very useful as a commentator.
Yeah, I bet it kind of gives a bit of character behind the car.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, George, thank you for joining us on the Sim Sundays podcast.
It's been my honour.
Stop it.
Love being part of the Grid Finder podcast, everyone. Make sure you subscribe.
Oh, you're doing my job for me, man. This is poetry. Well, thank you very much, and we'll be back with another interview during the 24 Hours of Spa during our SRO mini-series special. Thank you very much.
Hello, here we are, not at Spa, with another guest, as promised. If we're being really, really honest with ourselves, that weekend was completely nuts, and we're coming to you now from the very, very end of the weekend. It's 10 o'clock on the Sunday night, and we did not get any podcasting done at Spa because it was manic.
It's 24 hours of Spa,
totally manic. But what we do have is we have Chris back on the podcast after many, many, many weeks of him abandoning me. Chris, hi.
Hi. Well, I didn't abandon you necessarily. I had something to focus on for quite some time. So I took a hiatus from the show for a while, but I missed it. I missed it a lot because I like to talk into a microphone for some reason. So I'm back again. And
well, you came back for a good one. You came back for the 24 Hours of Spa.
It was... This whole weekend is like one of those situations where you're like, am I dreaming right now? Like, I've driven so much of this track so many times, and to see it in person was just like...
Sorry, I'm going to stop you there.
Amazing.
I like that you said I've driven so much of this track so many times. Not I've driven all of this track so many times. As in, I've done full laps many times. What you're saying is...
My version of sim racing is spending a lot of time in the grass.
You never quite complete a lap.
Yeah, you know.
Okay, and that's fine.
It's okay. I like rallycross for a reason, because I can't go off into the dirt. I'm already in the dirt.
The dirt is where you need to be, right? Yeah, so Spa, let's rewind then. So we came to you from the beginning outside the SRO hospitality truck thing, and we had George Morgan. We were actually with George Morgan, Ash Vanderlei, Lewis McGlade, and Eries, and we're like, guys, let's get some podcasting done. They're like, yeah, sure, great. George joined us, and then the whole weekend we were just running around the paddock. We were all over the place, speaking to various people, in and out of different, speaking to the teams, the different points to watch the race from. It was absolutely insane. I'm going to go and say that this is definitely the best race weekend that I've ever been to, ever. The 24 Hours of Spa is kind of iconic. It's up there with Monaco, Silverstone, Daytona, Indianapolis, Spa, and the Spa 24 is the jewel in its crown, I would say. Sure. Maybe for real hardcore motorsport fans, maybe even more so than the Grand Prix?
I mean, there's an interesting thing in sim racing that I've probably been a part of myself, where a lot of races happen at Spa, and it's always GT3, right? So you're like, oh, another race at GT3 at Spa. And we come to Spa and we watch GT3, and of course there was other cars here too, but like the pinnacle of the event is the GT3 at Spa, the one that we complain about in the sim racing world sometimes.
But when you actually stand at the track and watch GT3 at Spa,
I don't think I was. I had a mental image of what this weekend was gonna be like, but it didn't. It was exceeded and just trounced, and I didn't mentally prepare for how amazing just the sound of the cars, just the feel of the track, looking out and seeing just the forest and the little peaks of the action throughout the view that we had up in that restaurant.
You could see Eau Rouge from that little bar. There was Eau Rouge. There was the final chicane. You could see both the start-finish straights, or the pit straights, I guess you should call them. And then you could also see up into like
the
No
very
Name.
top of the hill. You could
No
see
Name.
it.
You could see them coming down through the trees in No Name. So you get like a real sense of the scale all from that one point.
It was impressive. Is
underselling it.
Underselling, yeah, that's a good way to say it. It's something that I'll never forget, because this is the first time I've been to a track ever.
You've been to American tracks, right?
I've been to American tracks,
Yeah.
but there's something that's different about the tracks over here, especially Spa. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
It's Spa.
It's Spa.
And
Yeah.
even though, we get this sim racing fatigue of, Spa with GT3, it was the most exciting race I've ever been to.
I would happily keep watching Spa GT3 for
I'm probably
the
going
next couple of days.
like it even more, because I'll be like,
Yeah.
I was standing right there, just like.
Yeah, well, I mean, so Chris, obviously you're from Ohio, and you live and work in Ohio, and the bulk of Gridfinder works in the UK, in Newcastle, and actually you're coming to work with us for 2 weeks from the office.
Yeah.
So hot lap for this month in the office will be Spa GT3 original, right?
It kind of has to be, right?
Yeah, it does have to be. So we saw Lewis, and we saw Ash, and we saw Irias, and we spoke to George, and George was great, obviously, so much energy. He was obviously commentating throughout the weekend. We had our team sponsor, Trak Racing. They were racing in the McLaren Trophy Cup across the weekend. Sadly, their Saturday race was cancelled due to the rain. And then we had the GT4 race. The GT4 race was nuts. We caught the end of it up on that balcony because we were like, right, this balcony is perfect for the start of the GT3 race, which starts in 3 hours. so let's just sit here, buy drinks, and just enjoy the afternoon of kind of just capturing this spot and being ready, being here for the start of the GT3 race. But we did get to see GT4 racing as well.
Yeah.
And I love racing GT4 and ACC. I find the racing to be a lot closer. I'm not an alien by any means, so it was nice to see the GT4s. I was like, my friends.
It was very cool to see the GT4s, and I think a part of the reason that I personally also like to race GT4s, they're easier to control. They just are, because the GT3s are heavier, they're faster. It's just a different beast to control. And one thing that really stood out for me is how close ACC really did get the sounds of GT racing. Like we've said in the past that ACC in their sound design is really good for the atmospheric effects and all, the gravel underneath, which you made fun of me because I'm always in the gravel, so I always hear the gravel.
Yeah, Chris is like, it's
car.
great. It's crazy how ACC you can like hear gravel hitting underneath the car for like the whole lap. Like, Chris, you shouldn't be able to hear that.
Tom's over here going, I don't. What are you talking about? I don't hear that. But if you spend some time in the dirt, you'll hear that. It's very good. But the sound design of ACC, they've really nailed it to a point where it really does sound like you're there. Like even when you're in those camera views that are, the drone view or the TV view or whatever you're watching a stream, the sound effects are really, really accurate. And I think that gave me a new appreciation for that game in general.
Well, the sound at the actual Spa 24 this weekend was probably... It was one of the highlights. I have a couple of highlights I want to talk about later. I want to talk about the night lap that I did. And just for, if you're listening to this on podcast and you can't see this on YouTube, we actually decided that we were going to light a fire during this podcast. So we are sat out in the garden and the back of our Airbnb, and I decide to light a fire, and I'm getting absolutely covered in smoke, and I can hardly see. My eyes are streaming. So watch the YouTube episode for that.
If you all of a sudden hear Tom choking, it's because the
I also
fire
think my
is
jeans are about to burst into flames. Okay, but that's fine. Yeah, the sound. The sound at Spa was definitely one of the highlights for me. And it's interesting what you say about the sound on ACC being so close, because actually something I noticed was that as we were walking alongside the track and you couldn't necessarily see the cars from certain angles, you'd be like, oh, that's a Mercedes, because I can hear that's a Mercedes. Oh, that's a McLaren. Oh, that's definitely the Porsche. Like, I wouldn't say bizarrely, for given what we do, I wouldn't say I'm a massive car nerd. I'm not like a facts and figures guy when it comes to cars. I couldn't tell you mostly like how many cylinders are in this car, how many brake horsepower each one has. I just love racing.
Yeah.
But what I was able to do is I'm like, oh, that's a Mercedes going past, that's an Audi going past, without even looking, just because you're so used to hearing those cars in the game, which then obviously led us to come to the conclusion that the sound design in the game is freaking awesome.
It's amazing. Yeah. Unfortunately, it also highlighted a couple of the other games that you're like, the sound design may not be quite as good as I thought. But yeah, it's just the environment and the overall feel of sim racing versus we'll say real world motorsport, or I don't know. We got to come up with a new term so it doesn't sound so. I think
motorsport and sim racing.
Motorsport.
If you sat down at your rig, you remember, what have you been doing this afternoon? Oh, I had an afternoon of motorsport.
That would be weird. Yeah,
that would be weird.
That's true. That would be very weird. But it gives you a new appreciation for, like, I don't know, at least from my developer mind, the work that's gone into things like ACC, the modding community of AC, that, you can download the audio packs that improve the engine sounds of various cars, and just some of the little nuances that we actually kind of take for granted in the sim racing world, where, you sit back and you're like, oh, that car sounds terrible in this game, but realistically it's probably decent.
Something else that it highlighted to me was I've kind of been really excited about the development of EV racing. So the Formula Foundation series that's starting in the UK soon, like, I've been following the development of that. The guys that developed the car actually are from the Northeast, and so we've been speaking. And I've watched a few laps that they've done at Brands Hatch. And I was like, this is really cool. This is like really, and it's obviously eco-friendly, good for the environment, and it will drastically reduce the carbon footprint of UK club racing. But having just spent the weekend at Spa, the soundtrack to that weekend was the GT3s and the GT4s and the GT2s, like tearing around that track and just echoing around the forest, and hearing the rumbles and the screams and the pops as they come off the accelerator, and even the squeaky brakes at the beginning of the race. They'll still be there in EVs, I guess.
We were making fun of the Porsche that was out front. We're like, oh, his brakes sound terrible. And then us as sim racers up watching the race, can you imagine having to deal with that for 24 hours? Like we have any knowledge of what any of this feels like in real life. But
I think if you were leading the race in the Spa 24 hours, you'd deal with the squeaky brakes.
Yeah, I think you'd be okay, right?
Yeah, right. I think that'd be fine. So we spent a lot of time watching the racing. That was really good fun. And then the race started. So as we were up, so me and Liam, who's right now sat behind the camera, we were holding that spot up on the rooftop on the pit straight, and it rained. It rained a lot. It was heavy rain. This is when you were going to go down to your grid walk, which you should talk about in a second.
Gave me the pit walk bracelet, and the moment I got out of any place that could provide me any cover is when it just poured down rain right on me, and I'm like, well, I guess this is just how Spa 24 is going to be for me. I'm just going to be sopping wet the entire time, and my hair's dripping into my eyes. I'm trying to talk to people, and it's just like, well, whatever. But even with that, because it's a little frustrating to have that kind of a situation, but I was still like on cloud 9, just like, I'm about to go see GT cars, like on the grid at Spa. Like, you couldn't, no matter what Mother Nature wanted to throw at me, you couldn't have ruined my mood.
Talk us through the grid walk. Like, how was it? So Liam and I did it at Monza, and we did it at Paul Ricard, and we only had 3 passes. So we're like, Chris, you go, and we gave 2 to the sim racing team.
Yeah.
What was it like?
It was, well, in the beginning when it was raining, we were talking about it. Hopefully it's not this whole time, but it was very crowded. It was a little different than I thought it was going to be honest with you. So in sim racing, when you're watching any sim racing event, they do that like grid fly through, right? Where you go in between the two rows of GT cars and you're just kind of going down, naming both of the drivers up and down the grid, right? And for some reason in my head, I was like, the grid walk is going to be that. I'm going to be walking in between the cars that are lined up on the grid slots, and I'm going to be I can freely move around, almost like the beginning of an F1 Grand Prix where you see the reporters just doing whatever the hell they want around there, right? And it wasn't like that. So at least in this specific race, they kind of lined them up more like a car show, which was interesting. I did get the benefit of, since it did just stop raining, all the cars came out to the track with wets on. But they decided, it's nice and sunny now, the track is drying, we're going to swap over to slicks. So I got to see them standing 2 inches behind the mechanic switching
and running
Chris. The gun. I know. Well, I had to get in there with the camera.
Inappropriately close, arguably.
Like, hurry up, whispering in his ear. Because I did send that video to my wife, and she goes, they look like they're moving kind of slow. I'm like, it's before the race.
Yeah,
this is not the pit. Like, I'm not in the pit with them during the 24 hours. But I got to see them switch the tires, and you could literally look into the car. So, like, in the beginning, I was off-put by the fact that I wasn't walking in the grid, because grid walk, quotes, you expect to be walking in the grid. And it was almost better in a way. So they were lining them up like a car parade, if you will, kind of just next to each other in one big line. But they were rolling them down in between the crowd. So, like, all of a sudden you'd get nudged by an usher. He'd push you off to the side, and a GT car's rolling by you and almost running over your foot. You're so close. And it was like, you stop thinking about anything other than wow. It's just rolling right by. You see the driver inside. You see all the switches and dials that you've seen in ACC. And you're like, oh, man, it looks just like it does in the game. And it's just it's almost like an unreal experience. Like, you're flying around in the game doing the free camera, looking into the windows, but it's in real life. And you're just standing right next to this car.
It's almost like the ultimate VR is like,
It's like it's not virtual reality; it's reality.
No way.
It was. If you ever have the chance to be able to, it doesn't even have to be Spa. Just get to see any GT car up that close. You really kind of get a new appreciation for just the level of detail that is in these sims that we race in, because I mean it's a 1-to-1 match. I mean, other than the liveries being a little bit different because we slap on whatever creative ones we want, but it's an amazing experience. And even if you can go to a car show that's in your local town and you can see some GT cars, go do it, because you will thoroughly enjoy yourself. Even if you're only a sim racer, like I told you earlier in the day, I have no aspirations of ever getting into a car and racing. I'm just a pure sim racer, and that's it. But it's still a very cool experience to be a part of.
Yeah, it looked like a cool experience. It did look very special being at Spa. It sounds like it's a little different, actually. Monza and Paul Ricard, they were on the grid, and then when we left, they then went off for the formation lap. So that's interesting, and I hadn't realised that. Now, when it finished, you then walked back up to where we were going to watch the start of the race from about 5 minutes before it started. So you had the ultimate experience. You literally walked from the grid to the balcony to then watch the start of the race. Now, the start of the race was a bit of an anticlimax because, of course, they came out and they did their formation laps, and obviously I think they were kind of just taking it easy. They did 2 or 3 because obviously it was a bit wet,
trying to make the track dry, a dry line or whatever, and someone found where it was not quite ready yet.
So we were just chatting away, and we're like, they're going to do another lap, and we're just there, just having a beer, just looking out, and then we just had this bang. And we looked up, because we could see Eau Rouge, and we just saw this car in the wall, and we were like, have they started?
Yeah.
No, it was the formation lap. Somebody lost it going up Eau Rouge on the formation lap, which obviously then the safety car that was leading them around then became the safety car.
Yeah.
Because they needed a safety car. So then we're like, we'll just sit here, just keep watching.
It did prolong the start, and it was a little bit like you didn't get that here we go moment. You're like, oh, dang it. And then, now they started. Kind of an anticlimactic thing, like you said.
When they started, though, it was magical, like that because obviously we saw them tearing up Eau Rouge, some side by side. You could see when they were getting the slip, and you could see that first bit of the Kemmel Straight as they were firing down there, and you could see them kind of getting in behind and going out, and it was 60 cars on the grid. It was intense. Like, from where we were, we could see the last car going up Eau Rouge at the same time as we were seeing the first car coming round Pouin.
Yeah.
So you could see the gap in from first to 60th was like more than half a lap, which was absolutely nuts. And then obviously they tear down into the bus stop, the last chicane, which is where we were stood pretty much over the bus stop. And the amount of information you can get about the cars, the way they're handling, the way the drivers are wrestling with them around that chicane, from that close up and from that like angle looking down, you could see where they were opening their steering wheels. You could see where the traction control was biting in stages as the car came around the corner. You could see the dive bombs up the inside. It was just
the absolute limits
beautiful.
that they were like toying with.
Yeah.
Just the smallest movements in and out, and just there were so many times where the racing was so close, like the three of us would just look at each other with like a ooh look, man, that's close.
And everyone on the back was like, oh my god, as like you see like 3 wide into the bus stop, and you just see the cars like clattering over the curbs, and obviously the cars are so stiff, and you see them bouncing around as they're landing, and we saw the cars spinning off in the runoff area. It was insane. Like, you know, thinking back to before I was a motorsport fan, I was thinking, watching racing is boring. You're just seeing cars going round and round and round. Mm-hmm. And I would never want to go and watch a race because you just sit and you just watch one corner over and over again. Spa, very, very different. You can see so much of the track. You can really get a sense of what's going on. They got their TV screens everywhere as well, so you can hear the commentary, and it was just, the atmosphere was just alive.
The atmosphere does a lot for it too, because like, so when you're watching at home or watching collaboratively with a Discord group or however you're watching a race kind of by yourself, quote unquote, it's so much different because like you build your own excitement. At the 24 hours of Spa, so I landed after an overnight flight where I got a wink of sleep for an hour, and I was able to still run for like the whole clock around until like 11:30 at night, I think is when Liam and I were like, we got to call it because we're just tired. It was like hour 36 or 37 or something crazy like that. And I was still like full energy because everyone around me was excited. Everything happening around me was just so much fun. And, you know, throwing sim racing in the middle of that with the SRO.
Well, good segue.
Yeah.
Good segue. So we watched the start of the race. I think we watched the first. It was the first hour because then practice started for the SRO Esports Pro Sim Series. Obviously, Gridfinder is competing in. That started at 5:30. So we watched the first hour, and then we went down to go and see our driver, Leon Hopper. Go and just make sure he was all right. Gave him some water, made sure his rig was all right, ready for his 3 hours of practice. And then we went around and got some dinner, and it was nice. It was nice. You know, Leon was getting his eye in. We were having some food.
Hey.
And then we went to the start of the race. Now, the start of the Pro Sim Series, the esports race, obviously, it was the race in the sim started at the actual time of the day, which is a bit different to how it's been done before. So the idea was that the race started, I think it was at 9, and the time in the game was also 9, which meant that as it was getting light to dark outside, it was getting light to dark in the game.
Yes.
So we started watching the race in day conditions, and when we finished, it was pitch black. You look round, and it's totally black outside. And so the 24 hours of Spa had also gone from light to dark, which was nuts because it just kind of really brought the sim racing and the real racing together. It was like they were racing at the same time, on the same track, in the same cars.
At the same
time.
Yeah,
like
the time of day.
Yeah. It was absolutely nuts.
You mentioned that because I hadn't looked outside. I was just paying attention to the race because the sim race was exciting, and you know,
it was
us
very
being sim
good.
racers, we love that stuff. And you mentioned that, and I looked outside, and I looked at the game, and I looked outside, and I was like, the sky looks identical.
And you could hear the cars out on the real track through the walls of the esports arena.
Yeah, it was...
And obviously in the arena, they were also playing the noise of the game. But you could hear both. So you could hear like the distant rumbling of the GT3s, whilst you could hear the close-up rumblings of the GT3s. It was just, and the race itself, the best race we've had so far. Like from start to finish, there was action. It was fantastic. A massive shout out to our driver, Leon. He did a fantastic job. In fact, I don't know how he did it, to be honest, because the night before, he camped at Spa overnight.
And it wasn't gorgeous.
It was not. It was rainy and wet.
Yeah.
And he turned up for the race and did an absolutely fantastic job. I think we qualified last, but we finished P16. He kept himself out of trouble. He was consistent. He was on the pace, made some cracking overtakes, and we were 1 point away from that golden point. The first 15 places in the Sim Pro Series give you points.
Right.
Tristan earned a point at Monza. We were out of the points at Paul Ricard, and we were 1 space away this time. But you know what? We're competing against Lamborghini, Porsche, BMW, Ferrari, Williams, all of whom are like factory-supported teams, some of which with full-time sim racers with, budget. So
imposter syndrome is real sometimes when I see our little name up there with some of those big names like that, where I'm like, I know it just feels like we shouldn't be there at times. I'm like, it's Grid Finder, and then Unicorns of Love, Williams, like it feels surreal at times for us to actually be there. But there, like you said, the sim racing race was super exciting, and Liam and I kind of stumbled upon, I don't know if it was a realization or just like secretly we all want it. So when you're watching car racing, there's a little part of you that's like, I want something to happen, but I don't want anyone to get hurt.
No, of course.
Obviously, because in sim racing, you're like, okay, let's get a little crazy here. Let's do a little bit more rubbing. And they do. So they make it more exciting because
there's less jeopardy.
There's less jeopardy there. You're obviously you're not going to go to the hospital if you get thrown into a wall or anything like that.
I don't know. There was that guy on the back left. I can't remember which team he was in, but he was animated. I thought he was going to do a shoulder in just from the way he was kicking off.
I'm glad he wasn't racing against Leon, who was sitting next to him. He might have reached over and slapped him or something like that. He was very passionate, we'll say.
It was. I mean, the whole race was. You could tell that people were really, really fighting for this. And you know what? The arena was rammed. There were people like queuing out the door. It was like
there were people on camping chairs outside the arena.
And it was on the veranda. It was 3 deep by the window, people trying to peer in to see the race. And then people had set up these like chairs. There was one TV outside showing the race inside. People had set up these camping chairs so that they could watch the race. Like, it was really popular, bearing in mind that they were making a choice of, do we watch the esports race or do we watch the 24 hours of Spa? I know it's 24 hours.
Obviously they have plenty of race to watch, but it was still kind of interesting for me to be like, so you have the real life motorsport, which is quote unquote better than sim racing, right? I'm saying that with a lot of sarcasm, obviously. And you're choosing to watch the sim racing stuff because it's sometimes more exciting than real motorsport. I might get hate for that one, but sometimes...
You will get hate. I'm going to be first in the comments, to be honest.
Sometimes sim racing can produce more exciting races than real world motorsport.
Who was the American TV presenter that you mentioned earlier? What was his name? The guy who does the thing where he's coming home from work.
Oh, Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers. So I'm going to have my Mr. Rogers moment here now. So as we're sat in the garden, we're sat by the fire. It's actually gotten quite dark. So Liam behind the camera, I'm hoping he's going to do some Photoshop wizardry to lighten this up.
I can tell you're not a video.
But as I am definitely not.
Quote there.
Oh, what's it? Photo video shop? I don't know. Liam shakes head.
Anyway.
So I'm going to put another log in the fire as we talk about the 24 Hours of Spa evening events. So the race finished. The race was absolutely nuts. Obviously, everybody congratulated Leon. And then attention turned back to the fact that there was a race going on. Now, you guys were pretty tired.
Yeah.
You'd been up a long time. In 2 days, you had slept for an hour. And Liam has also we've been out and about all over the place, absolutely exhausted. So you guys decided to call it a night. Fair enough.
We did.
And I was like, I don't know why, but I want to stay. So you take the car, I'll work it out, I'm going to stay. And then in true 24 Hours of Spa fashion, I say that like I've been a million times, I've been once, but I just feel like this is a very 24 Hours of Spa thing, right? So I was chatting away to Davide and Ivan, the guys from Kunos. We were just chatting about 24 Hours of Spa. We were chatting about ACC, and I was chatting to Alessio from AK Esports, who runs all of the events at the in the Fanatec Esports arena. And then at one point, Anthony comes up. So Anthony Rattel comes up and says, "Guys, get in this van. We're going to do a lap of the track." And I was like, hang on a minute. And I, you know, sometimes when you think you're about to say something and your instinct filters it, I was about to say, but there's cars on the track. And I just about managed to filter that thought from becoming.
Before we move on, Liam behind the camera is going to.
Oh yeah, this is a great story.
But
this is great.
We're sitting there in the restaurant overlooking.
Yeah.
The
so we're
entire track.
So we're rewinding just for a second,
Just
right?
for
So
a
we're going to
second, we
rewind
have
back
to.
to the beginning of the race because this
of
story is golden.
The filter of things that you think, right?
Yeah.
So we're sitting up there in the restaurant, and the race had just started. I think they're not even done with their first lap or whatever. And Liam,
No, was it not before the race?
I thought it was right
I think it was
after the
before
start.
because he was looking at his watch going like,
But
you tell the story.
He's sitting there and super tired, obviously, not quite running at 100% in the mental department at that moment. And he goes, "Hey Tom, how long is this race?"
So I looked at him with the longest stare ever. He looked back. I could tell there was this flicker in his eye of, oh, I've said something I'm going to regret. And my response, I just said to him, what, the 24 hours of Spa? He's like, yeah. It's like, it's 24 hours, Liam. Like, it's the 24 hours of Spa. I'm really sorry. At least Liam is laughing behind the camera. If he was just crying or he's like thrown his headphones down and stormed off, I'd feel a bit bad.
You could see, like, after he said it, he's like, yeah,
I'm out. I'm out. Anyway, so
right.
we're fast forwarding back now.
There were cars on the track, but you were not.
Yes,
gonna go
so
on
I
fan.
filtered. I unlike Liam, I filtered and I didn't say, but there's cars on the track. How can we do a lap? So turns out that during the night racing, there's an inner and an outer road around the track, and you can take a tour around. So we got picked up in this minivan, and I was like, how much are we really going to see here? We went on the inside track, and my God, seeing the cars in the pitch black with their lights on, it's a new level of intensity that somehow looks and seems faster, and you really kind of feel the danger as well, because you're just seeing these lights coming through the pitch black, like at ridiculous speeds, and you're seeing them side by side, you know, too wide into corners in the pitch black, and you can't make out the car. All you can see is these two like cat's eyes in the dark.
Brightest lights you've ever seen,
and they whipping through. You know, the chicane at the end of the Kemmel Straight. You know, the right left, like the speed at which the cars are changing direction is just insane. So we went round, did a lap of the track, and it just gave me this new kind of intense respect for the drivers, because that was just inhuman, like being able to control that car at that speed.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah,
and one of the moments, because there were a couple incidents overnight, and we're watching the highlights, and like there's a little bit of fear for the drivers, because they showed this one incident where a driver hit one side of the wall. I think it was the right side of the wall. Then his car flew across the track, hit the left side of the wall, but he hit nose first on the first hit. So his headlights were gone. And then all you see in the camera view of the replay is just this spinning silhouette of a car flying across the road as there's a bunch of headlights just approaching it. I can't even imagine the oh crap moment that you're like, oh, there's a car in front of me all of a sudden as I come around this right-hander here. Just the intense concentration reaction time. Like, how many times does your heart drop through your pants? And you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I avoided that. You know, it's just, I can't, I don't know how they do it.
No, I don't either. It was absolutely, insane. And I really enjoyed that tour around at night. I think that was about 11 o'clock at night. So anyway, so I go back to the like the little SRO cafe thing, and we're chatting away about all sorts of stuff, and then somebody says the word rave. There's a rave going on. And I hadn't really clocked this. I'd seen that stage that's at the bottom of Eau Rouge as we turned up. But somebody's like, are you going to go to the rave? And I was like, the rave? I was probably thinking about going to bed. I was like, should I go to the rave? Go to the rave. Anyway, I was like, do you know what? I'll go and see what the rave. I'll go wander over to Eau Rouge, and then maybe I'll find a taxi and go home.
Sure.
And I came out, I didn't know where I was going. And luckily I got picked up by a couple of friends of ours who were in a little golf buggy thing. So I get into the back of the golf buggy because they're off to the rave as well. and I get driven through the paddock, underneath the tunnel, and then out into the huge, like the stage, like what would you call it? There's this big like event area underneath the stage, but this area where everyone was just jumping around and just partying into the night.
Yep.
It like left was this incredible stage setup with all these crazy like lights and lasers and stuff, but to the right is Eau Rouge, and it hangs over.
Screaming GT3
Yeah, and it
cars,
sits there on the right hand side, and it just kind of dominates the skyline for half of this rave. You see stage, you look right, and then you see Eau Rouge, and you just see the cars absolutely flying up Eau Rouge, and it was just the most surreal experience ever to be sat there. And it was a guy called Martin Solvig, who's a big kind of DJ.
Right.
I guess I feel very old. One of those disc jockeys.
One of those.
He plays the tunes in the disco. Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, I haven't been out in a long time, and that was incredible. I was getting into it. But just being there, just hearing the GT3 cars during this DJ set, it was absolutely insane. It was fantastic. And I got in this morning at about 3:30 in the morning and have no regrets. It was just one of the best nights ever. And everyone there was just going for it. They were just in the moment. They just were just not stopping. That atmosphere there, the intensity of fandom that SRO has and the 24 Hours of Spa has is just unparalleled. I can't think of any other sporting events where people are just that passionately celebrate, like just being happy and being at a motorsport event. It was just wild. Yeah, and if you've not been to 24 Hours of Spa, or any SRO race, but really the 24 Hours of Spa would be a good one to do if you're going to just do the one. It is honestly life-changing.
Yeah.
I will endeavour to go there every year now, having been once. It was just so much fun, so much excitement, so much shared passion in one very concentrated, very weird place. It was just insane.
And of course, as all races do, as the race finished, after the 24 hours, they do the podiums and everything on that same stage where they did the rave.
All 5 podiums.
All 5
for all
podiums,
5 categories.
Yeah, there was a lot of podiums.
There's a lot of national anthems going on.
A lot of national anthems, yes. But one thing that we noticed when we were leaving, so event done, people are packing up, the teams are all trying to get their buses and semis out of there.
This is when and where we should have recorded this podcast.
Probably, because
and captured that moment.
We were walking around the hairpin, and we just, it was dead quiet. We'd heard cars for the last 24 straight hours, and it was just dead silent all of a sudden. And you and I said this weird thing. It was like, yeah, when the cars aren't on the track is like dead. It's like gone.
It's not breathing.
Dead. It's not breathing.
The soundtrack to Spa was just paused.
Yeah.
It felt
eerie. It was
really eerie, but inexplicably so, because you should just go to a racetrack and there's no cars there and it's fine. I think it's because for 24 hours, and longer because of all the support series, right?
Yeah.
But for 24 hours, we were just used to this kind of background symphony of GT3s just screaming around the track. And when it went, we were like, feels a little empty now.
Yeah, it's like, it was that bittersweet moment where you're like, okay, the event's over. That was amazing. That was an awesome experience. But oh man, can we start again? Let's go again.
Yeah, and we will. We'll definitely be going back there.
Yeah.
It was definitely the highlight of the calendar. So of the whole weekend, what was the best bit for you?
Of the whole weekend, the best bit, I think for me the best bit was when we did go up into that restaurant bar area, and we got right on the edge of that balcony, and I was just staring off and just seeing Spa weaving in and out of the woods. And I almost had one of those moments where sound went away. I know it sounds weird, but everything went away, and I was just I'm actually here. This is weird and amazing and exciting and exhilarating. Pick any of the crazy words that you want.
You're going through them.
It was one of those moments that was, I don't know, magical. I guess it sounds all kind of sentimental and everything, but it was just one of those moments where it wasn't even, everything was amazing, but that moment right there, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
It's right there in front of me.
Yeah, it is special. It's special, and that view was special. For me, I think it was probably let's assume that one's taken, right?
Okay, sure.
for me, I think it was probably the closeness that has developed within the paddock, and especially amongst the guys who were there for sim racing. There's a bit of a group now. Oh my God, the smoke. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, audio.
Pummeling you in the face right now.
Oh my God, that was a big one. Oh, that was a big one. The sparks are hitting me. My jeans are on fire. For me, I think it was the closeness that has kind of grown amongst all the guys who are doing the esports stuff within the paddock, and how tightly woven into the rest of the paddock it's become. Like, we arrived, the first moment we arrived on the Friday, between getting out of the car and getting to the esports event, we'd bumped into, had a chat to, said hello to maybe 7 or 8 people that we knew, some from previous SRO events, some from Sim Racing Expo, some from other events we've been to. And it was a real nice kind of coming together of a lot of people that we speak to all the time. You know, you've got the guys from Kunos, the guys from AK Esports, the guys from SRO, the commentators, Ash Vanderlei and George, and Lewis, and all the Veloce guys were there. You know, we said hello to David Tanitza like 5 minutes in, who, by the way, had a very, very unfortunate race. He got punted twice, the poor guy, and he actually had the same experience in Monza, his home race as well. He's been very unlucky this series. But yeah, just walking into the paddock and just knowing people it's a very surreal experience as well, actually. And it comes back to that imposter syndrome. It's like, Gridfinder, we've not been doing this for very long. Right. We've not been in this world, this community for very long. So to be able to walk through the paddock and people come and say hello and be very friendly and supportive, and how's it going, and what you're up to at Gridfinder, and what you're building, and all this sort of stuff, it's a really nice, welcoming place to be. Yeah. And I do hope that, you know, in the next few months and years, we'll be able to share this access with people that we have in our community who listen to Sim Sundays, or who are part of who are on Gridfinder, part of the leagues that are on Gridfinder. It'd be lovely to bring along as many sim racers as we can to this event.
Have Gridfinder meetups and
oh my God, yes, that would be so good.
Big giant picture with everyone in merch on and stuff, and just having a blast.
Oh my God, that I did make me a bit emotional. That'd be incredible.
Sim racing world.
Yeah. So I think it's fair to assume then that we've both been pretty taken by Spa.
Yes.
It's a pretty life-changing experience.
Without a doubt.
We will be back. Thanks, of course, to our SRO esports sponsor, Trak Racing, who also sponsored this event, this esports event, which was very cool. Thanks for sponsoring us, allowing our team to get out here and enjoy it. We brought the whole sim racing team. Obviously, Leon drove, but we brought the whole sim racing team out to Spa. We're in our Airbnb, so we all managed to share this experience together. And yeah, I think, since I can hardly see you now, Chris, because it's got very, very dark in this garden, and I can just see this very eerie orange glow of a face across from me, I think that'll probably wrap us up.
Yeah, that was an amazing experience, and hopefully follow us on Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff so that you can see some of the access. I have a lot of videos that I haven't even put out there, and we'll put some of those grid walk videos up on the Gridfinder socials so you can see exactly what kind of access and what we were talking about here. So grid_finder on Instagram, and just search for Gridfinder on any of the socials out there. But yeah, we definitely appreciate you guys hanging out with us, and we'll see you. Oh,
sorry, I'm going to interrupt. Just a quick note. The episode next week is incredible. The guest we have next week that we're still editing because it's nuts is incredible. That's all we're going to say.
Yeah. Well,
so tune in for that.
Tune in.
Tune in.
We appreciate you guys. As always, thank you very much, and we will talk to you next time.
Goodbye.